Does coffee and caffeine make you run faster? I have been drinking coffee as a part of my pre-race routine for many years, and I for sure feel that it helps me perform my very best. But what does the evidence say, and how should you use caffeine to get the optimal performance enhancing effect out of it? That is for sure not the optimal way to take your caffeine and coffee. And although I'm pretty sure that you shouldn't pour it directly onto your face, I'm not an expert when it comes to caffeine and running. So I thought I would talk with someone that knows a lot more than me on this subject. I'm joined here by Jonathan Fridolfsson, who is not only a really good runner with a sub 14 minute 5000 meters under his belt, but he's also a PhD student in sports science and knows quite a lot about the use of caffeine to boost running performance. Let's just start off with, does coffee or caffeine make you run faster?
Well, the short answer is yes. If you take people, have them run on a specific intensity or a specific distance or something, they will run faster for a longer time, either faster or for a longer time at a specific intensity, and that is actually quite clear for pretty much all distances, even like sprint distances and also ultra marathon running. So I would say that all research that we have points towards that.
I have dug in a bit into the evidence of caffeine's performance enhancing effects myself, and Jonathan is for sure right when he confidently says that it has a performance enhancing effect, not only for running but actually for most sports. Of course, as with everything, there is individual differences and variations, but the evidence shows that most people get a significant performance boost from caffeine. The first studies showing this effect dates back all the way to 1978, and those results have been confirmed in many studies since then. As I said, of course it will vary from person to person, but caffeine has consistently been shown to improve endurance by 2 to 4% across dozens of studies. That might not sound that much, but a 3% better performance can in many times be the difference between winning and losing. I mean, for the best runners running the 5000 meters around 13 minutes, those 3% becomes 23 seconds, which can be the difference from winning the World Championships and not even qualifying for the finals. That number of 3% is around the same that these new kinds of super shoes with carbon plates in them seem to improve running performance. And these cost around $300. And a double espresso costs around $3. So in terms of return of investment, taking caffeine before races seemed like a pretty obvious choice. So I got really curious on how common it is amongst average runners to use caffeine before races. And I think my following on YouTube is quite a good target group with different kinds of runners. So I made a survey on my community tab, and it turns out that out of the 2000 people that answered this survey, 34% don't take any type of caffeine before races, 51% take it but only their usual cup of coffee or tea, and only 16% of the runners answering make sure to take in extra caffeine before races. After seeing the strong evidence for caffeine, I'm a bit surprised that don't more people use it. Of course, most people watching my videos are not elite runners and maybe don't care about that performance boost. But to be honest, I think that if people knew that they could run around 30 seconds faster during a 5K, I think most people would take it. But what if we look at elite athletes? Do most of them use the advantage of caffeine? In a study with over 20,000 Olympic athletes who competed between 2004 and 2008, 73.8% tested positive for caffeine right after their competition. So pretty close to the number of people taking some sort of caffeine in my survey, which is of course a high number, but most probably all of those 73.8% did not take more than their regular intake, and even if all of them did, there are almost 30% not taking any at all and missing out on the performance enhancing effects from caffeine. So that might actually have affected the results in those Olympic Games. I really want to talk with Jonathan about how you should take in your caffeine to get your optimal effect out of it. My usual pre-race caffeine intake is just that I take one strong cup of coffee about 2 hours before the race. And I'm sure there are ways to optimize this to get your maximum effect out of it. But before we head into that, I'm also very curious why caffeine improves your performance in the first place. With your background in sports science, can you in some simple way explain how caffeine can have such a positive effect?
I'll do my best. So the thing with caffeine is that it affects our nervous system. And you can say that we have in our nervous system both like a fight or flight part and we call it usually like a rest and digest part. So the nervous system is both like trying to make us calm and alert at the same time, and those two are balancing each other. And the thing that caffeine does is that it is actually able to block some of the receptors that makes us tired. And when these receptors are blocked, we don't get as tired. That is like the main effect of caffeine. Then we have some other effects as well, but you can think of it like caffeine is not really making us more alert, but rather less tired. It's not like you are running faster on the same level of exertion, but rather that you are able to run on a higher intensity or higher exertion for a longer time.
So it basically makes you able to push harder and for longer. So I would like to know, how would you advise people to use caffeine if you want to perform as well as possible? And I guess since you're a really good elite runner yourself, maybe you can explain how you use it both in training and in competitions as well yourself.
To start with, I think most people should try it and use it for competitions and also like tougher training sessions. Maybe not all sessions, because the effect decrease if you use it too often. To start, usually you would recommend people to take between 3 and 5 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram body weight. So that means that if you weigh 70 kilos, for example, that would be like between about 200 milligrams to say 350 milligrams.
So if you, like me, weigh around 70 kilos, then those 350 milligrams translate into around 3 cups of coffee. But it turns out that it's actually really hard to know how much caffeine you get when you take it through coffee.
The problem is that in coffee, it's varying quite much how much caffeine there is in coffee, even if you use like the same kind of coffee from the same brand. Just from different batches, it can vary with like 100%. So you can have a cup of coffee with 30 milligrams of coffee or caffeine and another cup of coffee with 100 milligrams of caffeine. So, I mean, I drink, well, moderate amounts of coffee every day. But for competition, I always use like caffeine pills or some kind of energy drink, pre-workout drink or something with caffeine in, where I really know how much caffeine it is.
So you recommend for competitions to, if you want to know your dosage, it's better to take some caffeine pills or energy products than taking a cup of coffee?
Yeah, always before competitions, and then if I do some kind of interval sessions, I take some extra caffeine. But during training, I usually take about half of that, so maybe around 150, 200 milligrams of caffeine before training, and also I quite often for training I just take an extra cup of coffee or something. And then with this caffeine intake, it takes between 30 to 60 minutes for the caffeine to be like absorbed in the body. Usually a bit faster if it's in liquid and a bit slower if it's in pills. So say liquid would be about 30 minutes and then the pills would be like 60. So that means that you probably should take your caffeine at least an hour before the race start if you want to have the like maximal caffeine levels from the start. And usually that's a good idea. But it's also like this, that the rate that the caffeine leaves the body is quite slow. So we talk about a half-life of 5 to 6 hours. So that means that if you take 200 milligrams of caffeine, you will still have 100 milligrams of caffeine in your body 5 to 6 hours later. And that also means that if your caffeine levels peak 1 hour after you take the caffeine, it doesn't matter all that much if it takes another hour or so before you start your competition, actually.
I took some notes of what Jonathan said, because it's clear that if I want to optimize the effect I can get from caffeine, I have some room for improvement. So here's a summary. You should take between 3 and 5 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram body weight. If you drink a lot of coffee in your everyday life, you should probably lean to the higher end of that spectrum. And if you're not that used to drinking caffeine, lean to the lower side of that spectrum. You should take your caffeine at least 1 hour before you want to perform, and it's a good thing to maybe don't take it through coffee, rather use some sort of energy products or caffeine pills to make sure that you hit the right dosage. But with all this said, one could almost think that this video is sponsored by some sort of caffeine brand, because it truly seems like an incredible performance enhancer. So I had to ask Jonathan if there are any negative effects to drinking or taking caffeine, and if it actually can be dangerous in some way.
Some people get some like stomach issues from caffeine because of this like stress response in your body. And sometimes it's a good idea to have some margin there. So it's better to take it earlier than too close to the race, so you don't get the issues when you are running. So that's something that you could try. And regardless, I don't think that you should try caffeine for the first time during a competition, but try it on your training sessions before.
Are there any risk of if you take like too high dosage, does the performance start to decline, or does it matter if you take a bit too much?
It is actually dangerous to take too much. And then we talk about so the maximal intake that is performance enhancing is about 5 to maybe 6 milligrams of caffeine. Then it actually starts to decrease because you get all shaky and stuff. And if you probably around say 10 milligrams per kilogram body weight, so that's twice the amount that you should take maximum, it might not be very good for your body. And reaching say 20 milligrams per kilogram body weight, it starts to get really dangerous, actually, to be honest, because you can get heart issues. So you should be careful with that and not take too much. We have cases where people have died from taking too much caffeine. And actually, those cases are usually because people mix up milligrams with grams. So that's really important.
After the research I made and talking to Jonathan, as stated, if taken in the right dosage, caffeine is a really potent performance enhancer. So one could ask why this is not banned as a performance enhancing drug.
It was actually banned in a way between 1980 something and beginning of 2000. It wasn't banned completely, but there was a maximum limit that you could have in your like urine samples when they tested people, and this limit was probably just slightly above or at actually close to these cutoffs that I told you about, say 5 or 6 milligrams per kilogram body weight. I believe the main reason why it's not prohibited anymore is that first, you don't get more performance enhancing effects above that limit. And also, people tend to metabolize caffeine at a very different rate. So there are large variations in how quickly the caffeine leaves your body. And that means that the levels that you might measure in a sample might be super different depending on which individual, although they might have taken the same amount of caffeine. So it's really difficult to set such a limit in practice, right? So the thing is that we have caffeine in coffee, but also like in tea, chocolate, and other things. So I guess that's why it's it's allowed to take in the first place. I believe we have these 3 different criteria for something to be called doping. And first, it should have a performance enhancing effect, and obviously we have that with caffeine. Secondly, it should be dangerous in a way, or be some kind of health risk. The performing enhancing effect isn't dangerous of caffeine, but it can still be dangerous if you take too much. But on the other hand, drinking too much water is also dangerous if you drink too much. So it's a little bit difficult there. And also the last criteria for something to be considered doping is that I think it's phrased like it should violate the spirit of sports. So that's kind of vague. And sometimes it's referred to as everyone should have access to the same things and so on during competition.
And I guess now with coffee, it's something most people drink on a regular basis, and everybody has access to. So it's not this new strange thing.
I mean, carbohydrates have a performance enhancing effect, and if carbohydrates were created in a lab and not available in any foods, then that might have been banned as well. So it depends on how you think about it.
Thanks a lot to Jonathan for sharing all of your knowledge. It was so cool talking with such a good runner who also is super smart and well read. If you want to follow his career as an elite runner, you should check out his Instagram. It's linked in the description to this video. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you want to learn what you shouldn't do before running a race, you can click this video here. As always, thanks for watching, train smart, have fun, and I will see you in the next video.